Detective Sarah Martinez never expected her Tuesday night to change everything she thought she knew about one of music's greatest legends. The call came at 11:47 p.m., just as she was settling into her couch with a cup of coffee and case files that seemed to multiply by the hour. Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale had been breached, and not by your typical vandal or desperate fan seeking memorabilia. "Detective, you need to see this." Officer Chen's voice crackled through a radio as she pulled into the cemetery's winding driveway. The Gothic architecture loomed against the starless sky, casting shadows that seemed to dance in her headlights. She'd investigated countless crimes in her 15 years on the force, but something about this place after midnight made her skin crawl. The security footage told a story that defied logic. At exactly 2:15 a.m. the previous night, cameras captured a figure in a dark hooded coat approaching the Holy Terror section where Michael Jackson's tomb stood. What happened next left security guards speechless and would soon send shockwave through the investigation team. The figure wasn't there to vandalize or steal. Instead, they moved with purpose toward the marble crypt, producing what appeared to be some kind of electronic device. For 17 minutes, the cameras recorded them working methodically around the tomb's perimeter. Then, impossibly, a section of the supposedly solid marble wall simply slid away, revealing a hidden chamber that shouldn't have existed. Sarah's flashlight beam cut through the darkness as she examined the scene. The opening was perfectly concealed, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look and how to access it. The marble work was so seamless that even close inspection revealed nothing unusual about the tomb's construction. Whoever had built this hidden compartment possessed skills that bordered on the supernatural. Inside the secret chamber, her light revealed something that made her heart race. Shelves lined the walls, filled with items that seemed to tell a story decades in the making. But these weren't the typical treasures you might expect to find in a pop star's final resting place. These were documents, photographs, and objects that suggested Michael Jackson had been involved in something far more complex than anyone had ever imagined. A leather-bound journal sat prominently on a small pedestal in the chamber's center. Its pages, yellowed with age, contained handwritten entries that would challenge everything the world thought it knew about the King of Pop. The first entry was dated just 3 months before his death, and its opening words sent chills down Sarah's spine. "They are closer than ever to discovering the truth. If something happens to me, this journal will be the only evidence of what really went on behind the scenes." As Sarah carefully photographed each item in the chamber, she noticed something else that made her hands tremble. The walls weren't just lined with shelves. They were covered in what appeared to be a complex map of connections. Names, dates, and locations were linked together with red string, creating a web that stretched across continents and decades. At the center of this intricate network was a single photograph of Michael Jackson, but he wasn't alone. Standing beside him in the faded color photograph were 3 men Sarah didn't recognize, but their faces would soon become the focus of an international investigation. The timestamp on the photo's back read Neverland Ranch, December 1995, the final meeting. Below that, in Michael's distinctive handwriting, were the words, "The circle must never be broken, no matter the cost." The most disturbing discovery came when Sarah noticed that the chamber's floor was marked with symbols that seemed both ancient and modern. Carved directly into the marble were intricate designs that resembled no artistic style she'd ever seen. When she photographed them with her camera's flash, the symbols seemed to glow briefly, creating patterns that hurt her eyes to look at directly. Officer Chen's voice broke the eerie silence. "Detective, forensics found something else. The person who opened this chamber knew exactly what they were looking for. They took something specific and left everything else untouched." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Someone had known about this hidden chamber all along, had waited until now to retrieve whatever they'd come for. As dawn broke over Forest Lawn, Sarah realized she was standing at the beginning of a mystery that would challenge everything she understood about truth, fame, and the price of secrets. The journal in her hands felt heavier than it should, as if weighted down by the revelations it contained. Whatever Michael Jackson had hidden in this chamber, someone had deemed it important enough to risk breaking into one of the most secure cemeteries in Los Angeles. The question that would haunt her for weeks to come was simple yet terrifying. What had they taken, and why had they waited 14 years to come for it? As she sealed the chamber and called for backup, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that opening this hidden room had set something in motion that would be impossible to stop. Detective Sarah Martinez spent 3 sleepless nights poring over Michael Jackson's journal, and each page revealed layers of a story that grew more impossible to believe. The handwriting was unmistakably authentic. Forensic analysis confirmed it matched samples from Michael's personal letters and contracts. But the content read like something from a thriller novel, except every detail could be verified through public records that had been hiding in plain sight for decades. The journal's early entries painted a picture of a young Michael Jackson who had stumbled upon something extraordinary during the height of his fame. It began in 1983, during the recording of Thriller, when Michael described meeting a man named Dr. Edmund Hartwell at a charity event in Beverly Hills. Dr. Hartwell claimed to represent a group of scientists and historians who had been studying patterns in human achievement for over a century. Dr. Hartwell showed me photographs tonight that I can't stop thinking about. Michael had written pictures of Leonardo da Vinci's workshop, Mozart's compositions, Einstein's equations. But these weren't ordinary photographs. They were taken from angles that shouldn't exist, showing details that no historian has ever documented. When I asked him how this was possible, he smiled and said some truths are too dangerous for textbooks. The entries that followed described Michael's gradual introduction into what he called the archive, a secret collection of human knowledge that had been preserved and protected by a shadowy organization for generations. According to the journal, this group had been documenting and sometimes guiding the work of history's greatest minds, from ancient philosophers to modern innovators. Sarah's hands shook as she read Michael's account of his first visit to the archive's headquarters, hidden beneath a seemingly ordinary office building in downtown Los Angeles. The journal described vast underground chambers filled with artifacts, documents, and technologies that spanned centuries. Ancient scrolls sat beside modern computers, and interactive displays showed the connections between seemingly unrelated historical events. They showed me Bach's original compositions for pieces that were never published, Michael wrote. Manuscripts in his own hand, describing mathematical formulas that wouldn't be discovered by mainstream science for another 200 years. They explained that genius isn't random, it's cultivated, guided, and sometimes oppressed when it threatens the wrong people. The most shocking revelation came in entry from 1987, when Michael described being asked to become more than just an observer. The archive wanted him to use his global influence to embed hidden messages in his music and performances. These weren't subliminal advertisements or political propaganda. They were complex mathematical sequences and historical references that would serve as a backup system for preserving crucial human knowledge. Beat It isn't just a song about avoiding violence, Michael had written. The rhythm pattern, when converted to numerical sequences, contains the coordinates for 12 locations around the world where the archive has hidden emergency knowledge vaults. If something catastrophic ever happened to their main facility, these songs would be the key to rebuilding human understanding. Sarah cross-referenced the musical patterns Michael described with the actual recordings, and the mathematics checked out perfectly. Hidden within the beats and melodies of some of the world's most popular songs were encoded messages that had been listened to by billions of people without anyone realizing their true purpose. The journal revealed that Michael's famous dance moves weren't just artistic expression. They were physical representations of ancient symbols and mathematical principles. The moonwalk itself was based on a movement pattern found in medieval manuscripts describing how enlightened individuals could transcend ordinary physical limitations. Every gesture, every spin, every step had been carefully choreographed to preserve knowledge that would otherwise be lost to time. But the entries from the 1990s showed a different side of Michael's relationship with the archive. He began to question their methods and motives, especially after learning about other famous figures who had been recruited into their system. The journal mentioned names that made Sarah's blood run cold: celebrities, politicians, and business leaders who had all allegedly been part of this vast network of knowledge preservation. I don't know if I can trust them anymore, Michael wrote in 1995. They say they are protecting human knowledge, but some of their methods feel like control. They decide which inventions get released to the public, and which ones get locked away. They choose which historical truths get told, and which ones get buried. I'm starting to wonder if I'm helping preserve knowledge or helping them control it. The final entries, written just before Michael's death, revealed his growing paranoia and determination to break free from the archive's influence. He had discovered that the organization wasn't just preserving knowledge, they were using it to manipulate world events from behind the scenes. The journal described his plan to expose everything he had learned, but also his fear that the archive wouldn't let him walk away alive. If something happens to me, if I die under suspicious circumstances, people need to know this wasn't about drugs or stress or any of the explanations they'll give, Michael had written in his final entry. This was about knowledge, power, and the price of wanting to tell the truth. The chamber I built will preserve everything I've learned. Someday, someone will find it and continue what I started. As Sarah closed the journal and rubbed her tired eyes, she realized that Michael Jackson's death might not have been the end of the story. It might have been just the beginning. Someone had known about this chamber all along, had waited 14 years to retrieve something from it. The question now was whether they had come to destroy the evidence or to continue Michael's mission. Detective Sarah Martinez's investigation took a dramatic turn when forensic analysis of the chamber revealed traces of DNA that didn't belong to Michael Jackson or any known cemetery staff. The genetic profile matched someone in the FBI's database, Dr. Elizabeth Chen, a former MIT professor who had supposedly died in a car accident in 2018. The implication sent shockwaves through both local law enforcement and federal agencies who suddenly took a very active interest in Sarah's case. Within 48 hours of discovering Drive Chen's DNA, Sarah found herself sitting across from Agent Marcus Webb in a sterile federal building conference room. Agent Webb's credentials were impeccable, but something about his too-perfect smile and the way he seemed to know details about the investigation that she hadn't shared with anyone made her deeply uncomfortable. "Detective Martinez, we need to discuss the sensitive nature of what you've uncovered," Agent Webb began, sliding a thick manila folder across the table. Dr. Elizabeth Chen was not just any MIT professor. She was part of a classified research project that we've been tracking for over 2 decades. Her supposed death in 2018 was complicated. The folder contained photographs, documents, and surveillance reports that painted a picture Sarah could barely comprehend. Dr. Chen had been part of something called Project Renaissance, a government initiative that had been studying the connection between human creativity, historical preservation, and what the documents euphemistically referred to as pattern enhancement in cultural development. "You're talking about the archive," Sarah said, watching Agent Webb's expression carefully. Michael Jackson wasn't delusional. This organization really exists, doesn't it? Agent Webb's pause lasted too long. The archive is what Dr. Chen and her colleagues call their research network. What started as an academic study of historical patterns in human achievement evolved into something much more complex. They began to believe they could identify and guide individuals who showed potential for significant cultural or scientific contributions. The surveillance photos in the folder showed Dr. Chen at various locations over the past 5 years, places she shouldn't have been if she was actually dead. She'd been photographed outside recording studios, research facilities, and even at several celebrity funerals. Most disturbing was a series of images taken at Forest Lawn Cemetery over the past year, showing her conducting what appeared to be careful reconnaissance of Michael Jackson's tomb. Why break into the chamber now? Sarah demanded. If she knew about it all along, why wait 14 years? Agent Webb opened another section of the folder, revealing documents that made Sarah's heart race. Because something changed 3 weeks ago. Dr. Chen wasn't the only member of the archive who supposedly died, but continued operating in secret. We've identified at least 12 individuals over the past 20 years who faked their deaths to escape federal investigation, but continued their research underground. The document showed a pattern that was both brilliant and terrifying. Members of the archive had been systematically removing themselves from public scrutiny while maintaining their network of influence. They had continued their work in secret, identifying and guiding new generations of artists, scientists, and innovators without anyone realizing the scope of their involvement. Michael Jackson discovered something in his final years that threatened their entire operation. Agent Webb continued. Our analysis of his journal suggests he had identified the real purpose behind the archive's activities. They weren't just preserving knowledge, they were controlling it, deciding which innovations reach the public and which ones remain hidden. Sarah studied the timeline charts Agent Webb spread across the table. The archive's influence extended far beyond entertainment and into technology, medicine, and scientific research. Patents that should have revolutionized industries have been mysteriously withdrawn or buried in legal challenges. Breakthrough medical treatments have been delayed by regulatory obstacles that appeared from nowhere. Scientific papers describing paradigm-shifting discoveries had been retracted due to sudden questions about methodology or funding. "They've been playing God with human progress," Sarah whispered, understanding the full implications. "Slowing down developments they consider dangerous and accelerating ones that benefit their agenda." The most chilling revelation came when Agent Webb showed her intercepts of communications between archive members over the past month. They had been planning something they called the Final Collection, a systematic retrieval of all evidence that could expose their network. Michael Jackson's chamber had been just the first stop on a much larger operation. Dr. Chen took something specific from that chamber, Agent Webb explained, pointing to enhanced photographs of the crime scene. Based on the displacement patterns and the way other items were arranged, she removed what appears to have been a small electronic device and several specific documents. "We believe these contain the names and locations of other archive safe houses and the identities of current network members." Sarah's phone buzzed with an urgent text message from Officer Chen back at Forest Lawn. 2 more hidden chambers had been discovered at other celebrity grave sites, both showing signs of recent forced entry. The pattern was becoming clear. Someone was systematically destroying evidence of the archive's existence while preserving whatever information they needed to continue operating. This isn't just about Michael Jackson anymore, Sarah realized. Whoever's doing this is either trying to expose the archive or they're preparing to take it underground permanently. Agent Webb nodded grimly. "Our intelligence suggests it's worse than that. We think the archive is preparing for what they call a reset event, a controlled disruption of technological and cultural development that would allow them to reshape society according to their vision. The evidence Michael Jackson gathered could have stopped them, but now that it's in the wrong hands, it might be used to accelerate their timeline." As Sarah left the federal building that evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The investigation had evolved from a simple cemetery break-in to something that threatened the foundation of everything she thought she understood about how the world really worked. Somewhere out there, Dr. Elizabeth Chen was using Michael Jackson's own research to pursue goals that could reshape human civilization itself. The question that kept her awake that night was whether she was investigating a crime or trying to prevent a catastrophe. Either way, she was running out of time to find answers. Detective Sarah Martinez's world exploded into chaos when she discovered that her own apartment had been searched with surgical precision. Nothing was missing, but everything had been subtly disturbed by someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. The message was clear. She was being watched, and the archive knew she was getting close to something they desperately wanted to keep hidden. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Officer Chen had been analyzing security footage from other Los Angeles cemeteries and discovered a pattern that made Sarah's blood run cold. Over the past 2 weeks, 5 more celebrity burial sites had been accessed by the same mysterious figure. Each break-in had been perfectly timed to avoid security patrols and had left behind the same evidence, hidden chambers that had been opened and selectively emptied. "She's not working alone," Officer Chen reported as they studied the footage in the precinct's conference room. "Watch this." He played video from Hollywood Forever Cemetery showing the familiar hooded figure, but this time a second person was visible in the shadows, coordinating the operation through what appeared to be sophisticated communication equipment. Agent Webb arrived within an hour of their discovery, but this time he wasn't alone. The woman with him introduced herself as Dr. Amanda Foster, supposedly a cultural anthropologist from the Smithsonian. But something about her immediate familiarity with the technical details of their investigation made Sarah suspicious. "Dr. Chen is more dangerous than we initially realized," Dr. Foster explained, spreading new documents across the table. "Our latest intelligence suggests she's not trying to destroy the archive, she's trying to weaponize it. The items she's been collecting from these hidden chambers contain something we never expected to exist." The documents revealed that Michael Jackson hadn't been the archive's only celebrity recruit who had grown uncomfortable with their methods. Over the decades, several high-profile members had created their own backup network, hiding evidence and technology in secret locations that could be used to expose or counter the archive's influence if necessary. "It was like an insurance policy," Dr. Foster continued. "These celebrities knew they were playing a dangerous game, so they created their own shadow archive filled with evidence, advanced technology, and detailed records of the archive's activities. Michael Jackson's chamber was a central hub containing coordinates and access codes to dozens of similar hidden locations." Sarah studied the crime scene photos with fresh eyes. The symbols carved into Michael's chamber floor weren't just artistic. They were a complex navigation system that could guide someone to the other hidden sites. Dr. Chen hadn't just stolen documents. She had acquired a roadmap to decades of carefully hidden evidence and potentially revolutionary technology. The investigation took a personal turn when Sarah received a phone call that made her hands tremble. The voice was electronically distorted, but the message was crystal clear. Detective Martinez, you're investigating forces you don't understand. Michael Jackson died because he tried to expose us. If you continue down this path, you'll discover why some secrets are kept at any cost. Rather than intimidating her, the threat only strengthened Sarah's resolve. She began working with a small team of trusted colleagues, using police resources to track Dr. Chen's movements while staying off Agent Webb's radar. Something about his sudden appearance and Dr. Foster's convenient expertise felt orchestrated, as if they were being fed information to steer the investigation in a specific direction. The breakthrough came when Sarah's tech specialist, Detective Ray Kowalski, discovered that the electronic interference patterns at each cemetery break-in matched advanced military-grade equipment. Whoever's doing this has access to technology that's decades ahead of anything civilian law enforcement uses, Ray reported. The signal masking, the precise timing of security system disruptions, this is sophisticated stuff. Their investigation led them to an abandoned research facility in the San Fernando Valley that had supposedly been closed since 1998. Public records showed it had been a computer development lab, but satellite imagery revealed that someone had been maintaining the buildings and had recently installed new communication arrays on the roof. Sarah's team conducted surveillance of the facility for 3 days before they witnessed something that changed everything. Dr. Elizabeth Chen arrived at the compound in a convoy of 3 black vehicles, accompanied by at least 8 other individuals who moved with military precision. They unloaded equipment that included computers, scientific instruments, and what appeared to be the artifacts stolen from Michael Jackson's chamber. They're not just hiding, Ray observed through binoculars. They are building something. The team's covert photography revealed that the facility had been converted into a sophisticated operations center. Large screens displayed world maps covered with thousands of blinking dots, each apparently representing some kind of data point or location. The stolen documents from celebrity chambers were being fed into powerful computers that seemed to be running complex analysis programs. Sarah's worst fears were confirmed when her team intercepted fragments of communication from the facility. The archive wasn't planning to go underground. They were preparing for what they called Phase 3 implementation. The stolen evidence from Michael Jackson and other celebrity chambers wasn't being destroyed. It was being used to identify and neutralize anyone else who might pose a threat to their plans. They are creating a target list, Sarah realized as she studied the intercepts. Everyone who ever knew about the archive, everyone who might have evidence, everyone who could expose them. They are planning to eliminate all potential threats simultaneously. The most chilling discovery came when Ray enhanced the facility's communication traffic and discovered that the archive's network was far more extensive than anyone had imagined. The signals were bouncing between locations on 6 different continents, coordinating activities that spanned from entertainment industry boardrooms to government research facilities to university laboratories. As Sarah prepared to contact federal authorities with their findings, she received another call from the electronically distorted voice. You have 48 hours to stop investigating and destroy any evidence you collected. After that, we'll consider you a hostile asset and respond accordingly. This is not a negotiation. The call ended before Sarah could respond, but the message was clear. The archive had been watching their every move and was prepared to escalate their response. As she looked at her team of dedicated officers, Sarah realized they were no longer investigating crime. They were fighting for their lives against an organization that had been manipulating human civilization from the shadows for decades. The question now wasn't whether they could stop the archive, but whether they could survive long enough to expose the truth that Michael Jackson had died trying to reveal. Detective Sarah Martinez's hands shook as she held a device that would either save civilization or destroy her career forever. Hidden in the deepest part of Michael Jackson's secret chamber, behind a false wall that took her team 3 days to discover, was a small quantum drive containing what appeared to be decades of recorded conversations, video footage, and data that could expose the archive's global network. The final showdown began when Dr. Elizabeth Chen made a critical mistake. In her urgency to collect evidence from celebrity chambers, she had overlooked the most important piece of Michael Jackson's legacy, his final insurance policy. The drive contained not just evidence of the archive's activities, but also the locations and identities of their entire global operation, recorded in Michael's own voice during secret meetings he had attended over the years. They never knew I was recording everything. Michael's voice echoed through Sarah's headphones as she listened to the drive's contents. Every meeting, every ceremony, every discussion about controlling human progress. I made copies of everything and hid them where they would never think to look, in the one place they believed they completely controlled. The recordings reveal the true scope of the archive's influence. For over a century, they have been identifying individuals with exceptional creative or intellectual potential, and either recruiting them into their network or eliminating them as threats. The list of names was staggering: artists, scientists, inventors, and leaders whose work had shaped modern civilization, all secretly guided or suppressed by the shadowy organization. Sarah's blood ran cold as she listened to recordings of archived meetings where they discussed managing historical events. They had deliberately suppressed medical breakthroughs that could have saved millions of lives, delayed technological innovations that might have solved global challenges, and manipulated cultural movements to prevent social changes they considered threatening. The most shocking revelation came in Michael's final recording, made just days before his death. I've discovered their ultimate plan. They call it the Great Simplification. They believe human civilization has become too complex, too uncontrollable. They are planning to trigger a systematic collapse of modern technology and social structures, then rebuild according to their vision of proper human development. Agent Webb's true identity was revealed in these recordings. He wasn't a federal agent at all, but Dr. Marcus Hartwell, grandson of the Dr. Edmund Hartwell who had first recruited Michael in 1983. The archive had been a family business spanning generations, with each new leadership group becoming more radical in their methods and goals. Sarah realized that her investigation had been carefully orchestrated from the beginning. The archive had allowed her to discover just enough information to lead her to this moment, where they could retrieve Michael's final evidence while simultaneously eliminating everyone who knew the truth about their operations. The abandoned research facility that her team had been watching wasn't the archive's operational center. It was a trap. As Sarah and her colleague prepared to raid the location, they discovered that it had been rigged with enough explosives to level several city blocks. Dr. Chen and her team had been using it as bait, knowing that law enforcement would eventually track them there. But Michael Jackson had anticipated the scenario. Hidden within his quantum drive was a complete communication protocol that could broadcast the archive's secrets simultaneously to news organizations, government agencies, and social media platforms around the world. The system had been dormant for 14 years, waiting for someone to activate it with a specific code sequence that Michael had embedded in the lyrics of his final, unreleased song. Sarah found herself in a desperate race against time. The archive's Phase 3 implementation was scheduled to begin within hours, starting with electromagnetic pulses that would disable communication networks across major population centers. Once the infrastructure was crippled, they planned to release carefully crafted information that would blame the attack on foreign enemies, allowing them to implement emergency measures that would essentially give them control over global recovery efforts. The final confrontation took place not in some dramatic location, but in the basement of the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office, where Sarah had gone to verify the authenticity of Michael Jackson's remains. To her horror, she discovered that the body in the tomb wasn't Michael at all. It was a sophisticated replica that had been placed there to maintain the deception while Michael's actual remains had been moved to the archive's private facility. Dr. Elizabeth Chen was waiting for her there, no longer hiding behind disguises or operating in shadows. Detective Martinez, you've been remarkably persistent. Michael always said the truth would eventually surface, but he never imagined it would take 14 years and require someone like you to piece everything together. The confrontation revealed that Dr. Chen wasn't trying to weaponize the archive's technology. She was Michael Jackson's secret ally, working for over a decade to gather enough evidence to expose their operations. Her supposed death had been staged to allow her to work underground, following a plan that Michael had developed in his final months. Michael knew they would kill him, Dr. Chen explained as she activated the quantum drive's broadcast system. But he also knew they would be so focused on covering up his death that they wouldn't realize he had created a completely separate network of evidence collection. Every time they thought they had found and destroyed his insurance policies, he had 3 more hidden somewhere else. As the archive's secrets began broadcasting simultaneously to thousands of locations worldwide, Sarah realized that Michael Jackson's greatest performance hadn't been on any stage. It had been the 14-year deception that had lured his killers into believing they had won while he orchestrated their complete exposure from beyond the grave. The global response was immediate and overwhelming. Archive facilities on 6 continents were raided simultaneously, their members arrested, and their suppressed technologies released to universities and research institutions worldwide. The medical breakthroughs, environmental solutions, and social innovations that had been hidden for decades began flowing into public knowledge, promising to accelerate human progress by generations. As Sarah watched the news reports flooding in from around the world, she understood that Michael Jackson's tomb had never been about preserving his legacy. It had been about preserving humanity's future. The King of Pop's final act had been to ensure that the truth would eventually set the world free, no matter how long it took or what the cost. Standing in Forest Lawn Cemetery as dawn broke over Los Angeles, Sarah paid her respects at Michael's empty tomb, knowing that his real monument wasn't made of marble, but of a liberated knowledge that would now help build a better world. The mystery was solved, but the real story was just beginning.